Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zollizer here with Faith Edem. I'm based in Medellin, Colombia, and Faith is based in Canada. So let us know, which part of Canada are you in right now?
I'm currently in Toronto.
Okay, Toronto.
Hmm.
Never been, but suppose that's one of the best restaurants in the world, and very cool city. So welcome to episode 3 of season 10 of the Social Change Career Podcast. We're delighted to have Faith here with us, and she's going to be talking about strategy for change, how to build a career in climate and public policy. Obviously, one of the most urgent issues facing the entire planet. I will read Faith's bio, just summarize a little bit about her, and give you an overview of how this works, and then we'll jump right in. She's an economic advisor at Environment and Climate Change Canada, where she works on bilateral climate finance programming in the International Affairs branch. That is a mouthful, but we'll break that down. She works to support country-driven climate target implementation and climate governance in developing countries. She holds a master's in public administration from Queen's University in Canada, not Northern Ireland, and a BA in honors in law from BA honors in law and political science from the University of Toronto. She has a tremendous range of expertise in climate finance, energy policy, net zero emissions, building, decarbonization, environmental justice, and sustainability. As a young leader, she's been recognized as a 2022 Aspen Institute Future Leader, a 2021 Corporate Knight 30, Under 30, and Sustainable Leader, and a Sustainability Leader, and a Green Biz Circularity 2021 Emerging Leader. She's also a policy researcher, published climate resilience author in Our Stories, and awarded Diversity Inclusion Actor. So for people who haven't been through our live podcast in the past, this will go for about 50 minutes. We're trying to do this weekly. I'll ask questions for a little while, but we'd love to hear from the audience, particularly watching on LinkedIn. So please let us know where you're watching from, and feel free to start putting in questions or comments and suggestions. This will be converted to an episode of our podcast, so on our site and all major podcasting platforms within about 2 weeks. So we have about 100 other episodes from all over the world, featuring brilliant innovators and changemakers, sharing the insights about their careers, conversations, opportunities, and challenges. And one just ask for everybody, if you're taking a minute to watch this now or listen to it in the future, if you take 30 seconds to rate the podcast, it helps grow our audience. And these are really amazing, brilliant, wonderful people. Before we jump in, I can see some people are already sharing where they're watching from. So I'll just show, welcome Benny Shyam from India. Great to see you. Welcome Juliana from Jackson, Mississippi. Welcome Lillian from Kenya. So please let us know as we go through where you're watching from. And thank you very much for joining us. Albert, welcome from Ghana. Let's see if we have anybody from Latin America or North America. So to start off with, Faith, can you talk a little bit about the essence of your career? Like, what type of change have you been focused on advancing, both in your current role and previously?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, it's really breaking down the silos that we all work in, whether it's the public sector, the private sector, non-for-profit space. We're all working towards impacting change. So through my work in public policy and the public service space, I'm trying to find opportunities where we can increase those partnerships and hopefully leverage them to support more ambitious climate action. And I think that's kind of been the crux of my career so far, just trying to, rally towards that work.
Wonderful, and great to see you, Isabel and Natalia and Musab from all over. So one question, if you think back to a younger age, did you have, the research has increasingly shown it's better not to ask youth what they want to be when they grow up, but better to ask, like, what are the challenges or opportunities you want to engage with?
Yeah.
But if you think back to, let's say, pre-professional career, did you see yourself working in climate or in climate finance, or how did you wind up working for the Canadian government?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I wasn't one of the folks who were like, I'm centered in on this career path and this is all me. For me, I think what really drove me when I was younger and, going through all the different courses to see what I was interested in, I was really interested on the international focus of things, of supporting collaboration, engagement on the large scale. So, being a kid, reading about the UN and all the different organizations that are working towards bringing countries together and bringing large actors together. I think that's what drove me, just to support collective activism. And I think this speaks to most folks who work in the impact space. We're all just working together to try to commit to something and then implement some actionable items towards it. So I think when I look back to like those type of courses I had when I was younger and just trying to figure out what interested me, I think it really aligns to like, all right, let's get people together and do something pretty much.
So welcome Isabel, Natalia, Anamika, and Luida from Ecuador, India, the US, and San Juan Island. So a couple of questions. What was your first either volunteer activist experience or paid experience? Like when did you realize, I mean, because there's activism, which is essential to advancing systematic change. So did you build your career first in activism and organizing, or how did you get about both learning how to organize and understanding the trends and necessities around climate and sustainability issues?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, my parents have always been in the activism space in regards to supporting youth development. So for me, that's where it started from, supporting youth to understand, what's accessible to them. I remember I was part of my city youth cabinet, and we did a couple research projects on trying to just find career pathways for youth, because I mean, it's really hard to understand that when you're young. And I think that stemmed into, okay, what can impact change? Policies can impact change. And before, I was really interested in law, but the more that I worked on volunteer projects that had to do with young people and climate action, I think that's what really got me going. I think one of the first initial like big projects where I was like, oh, I think this might be it. So the UN has a volunteer program opportunity, and one of the projects was conducting research on the Indo-Pacific region, looking at the small island developing states and looking at their energy profiles and compiling some research around that. And I mean, it really shocked me, the lack of alternative options and more sustainable options for countries that are more at risk. And for me, it was really like, what can we do? What can we do to help them get on the right path in regards to, less reliance on fossil fuels or less cleaner fuel sources?
And looking over your experience, you also were very engaged as a student, in lots of impact opportunities. So for people who might be in university or grad school, what are your recommendations? I mean, I taught full-time for 10 years, I still teach, but what are your recommendations for someone who has that student status? Like how to build up skills, expertise, networks beyond just classes?
Oh, yes, this is so important. There's always so many resources available when you are a student. So I think people don't take advantage of the status as much as they can. There's always projects looking for interns or just student volunteers to support. For instance, I know there's a local climate change group here in my region, and they're always looking for volunteers to support. And through that can lead you to building more networks. So I think one of the biggest things is don't be shy to reach out, even if you feel like you missed the sign up date or the check-in date. Reach out. You never know what might be available to you. And I think it's important to branch out. I remember I did Model UN when I was an undergrad at university, and I was like, is this something I really want to do? But I think the curiosity of like, oh, well, I will be able to engage with other young people who are kind of passionate about governance and collaboration. Okay, maybe I'll have an opportunity to learn something new and build those networks. And I did. And, that led me to do it for 2 years. And that was a really great opportunity to also get in the mind state of, public service and working towards the public good. Oh, I think you're on mute. One of those.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much. So in terms of thinking back to your undergraduate and graduate, 2 questions. So one, for people, I mean, sustainability or climate is such a huge issue. We need everybody, so Project Drawdown, which does some of the best research, has some great data and reporting, basically going, every job should have a climate aspect or be climate central. So, it could be protesting on Greenpeace, which they're doing, with Shell. It could be trying to tax oil companies. It could be working on graphic design and communication. So 2 questions. One is, within your academic training, what were the most valuable skills that you developed related to climate careers? And for people who are thinking about if they want to do, I mean, most of our audience is generally around age 32 and above, but we have younger people. So for people who are thinking about, they've been doing X, but they want to move into climate, and they might want to do grad school professional training, how do you suggest they figure out, like, what are the right ways to upskill and picking the right path?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Also, I'll start with the skills that I was able to gain through, my graduate program. So again, I did a master's in public administration. And for me, I think the key skill sets they really pushed forward was strategic thinking, being able to think outside a box and think critically about how to marry the different levels of government, right? So I think understanding the mechanisms of government, if that's where you want to end up, not everyone that does this master's degree ends up in government. I know some folks that ended up in the private sector and non-for-profit space. But I think just having that foundational understanding of governance is really important. And then I think the other key skill is, of course, research, being able to conduct qualitative and quantitative research effectively. And I think people, sometimes might think, oh, that means I need to know how to do STATA or R and all of these technical computation skills, which are great to have. But sometimes it's just the bare bones of effective qualitative research and bare bones of being able to identify trends within quantitative data. And then lastly, of course, communication for me. I think the great opportunity through my program was that we got to really engage with each other. We were not forced, sorry, that's not the word. We were encouraged. We were encouraged to conduct group projects. So that definitely promoted your communication skills, being able to provide accessible information. So for folks who are interested in potentially working in climate and public policy, I would definitely consider those as transferable skills. If you already currently have some elements of those skill sets, I think it can definitely be transferable. The great thing about working the public sector is you can have any background as long as you just meet the requirements. Of course, the key skill sets, there is an opportunity for you at different levels of government. So here in Canada, for the federal level and for provincial, which is considered state level in America, you would definitely need a master's if you do want to work in policy. So I know folks who have a master's of public administration, master's of public health, masters of sustainability. You don't have to be concentrated in a specific subject area, but it would definitely help, especially if you want to work in environment, climate change department, something similar to that. But I do think there is opportunity to take on those transferable skills, identify which area in governance you want to work in public sector you want to work in, and find an opportunity through maybe a master's program to do so, at least here in Canada.
And do you consider yourself, so you're in the civil service, so if you want to stay in government, because you started at the provincial level in Ontario, and now you're at the federal level, so if you want to stay in policy and government for your career, you'd have that opportunity.
Yeah, you definitely would. It's definitely not like a bridgeable program, of course, or something similar to that. They are distinct, but the good thing about that is that you're able to make alignments and identify, okay, at the provincial level, this is what we focus in. How can I broaden this if I'm interested in the federal level? And I think that's the opportunity of working at different levels of government. And I think one of the most important levels of government is municipal work and local work. That's where a lot of the on the ground work really gets done. So there are always opportunities there as well. So if you're not really keen on the big picture of things or the machinery of government at such a large level, there's always municipal to consider. And I feel like they're a little bit more flexible in their requirements as well. Some of these opportunities don't require a master's. Some do, depending on the type of work.
Wonderful. And please, questions. I can see there's lots of people connecting. Feel free to put your questions or comments. And just to put a plug in, there's brilliant groups around the world, both locally, regionally, nationally, and globally, working on, let's say, the city level. C4 Cities is a great one that's often hiring, and often some of their positions are remote. So I'll put the link in here. And I live in Colombia. They actually I don't know if the position's still open, but Bogota has some of the best bike routes in the world, particularly for a city in the global south. I mean, it has a horrible some of the worst traffic in the world, but some of the best bike routes. And so they were hiring for a consultancy to help make Bogota a more walkable city. And so I just think they have these really cool things that just contribute to making life better. So one question just about the awards and public speaking, whether it's Green Biz or sustainability or the Under 30 awards, just how did you get these awards? Like, did people nominate? Did you get nominated? You nominated yourself? You were in the right place at the right time. And for people who are, let's say, younger and building high impact careers, these awards both can raise your own career, but also connect you with great change makers. So how does someone go about finding these or getting nominated or being nominated?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something I struggled with initially in my career of like, how do I stand out essentially, or how do I build my profile in this space? So what I would do early on in the days, I would look to folks that I look up to, or folks that have career paths that I thought, okay, I kind of want to be aligned to this type of career path and moving through industries in this way. And I would kind of keep a repository of, oh, okay, they did this fellowship, or they did this development program, or this award. And then I would look at the requirements, and one of them was called Leading Change Canada, and it's with Globe, which of course is a great leader in terms of Canada's climate action and things like that. But they have a youth-focused group called the Future Leaders. And I remember I was like, okay, I'm still within the timeline of applying to it, but I'm not too sure if I would fit their profile of folks they want to join. And I reached out to them, hey, I'd be interested in this. Can you let me know a bit more about it? And they were really supportive at the time of like, yeah, definitely reach out, apply for it. You never know what happens. And I was able then to attend Future Leaders twice in 2019 and 2020. And that was a really great opportunity, because I think even that initial engagement catapulted my my profile, I should say. That's where I was able to then meet my mentor, and then my mentor was able to then be my recommender for one or two of the awards that I currently have. And then, through there, you slowly build your networking and build out. So I think don't be shy to look for these things, but there's always great databases available and resources available of all these type of opportunities. I recently came across one. I'll definitely share it with you, Craig, so that we could share it with folks who might be interested. But it was like a span of like different internships and fellowships and job opportunities, similar to the great work that PCDN supports. So I think just finding great resources like PCDN, that's actually how I got the Future Leaders Climate Program. It was through PCDN, the newsletter, and I was like, oh, I think this might be something I'm interested in. So, it's definitely signing on to the newsletter and resources similarly, and just putting yourself out there.
Okay. And thank you, Keja. Welcome. And thanks for the plug for PCDN. So obviously you're a very skilled communicator, and that is a critical, let's say, skill area to be able to both communicate verbally, digitally, with data, with stories. So what are your suggestions if someone wants to work on a more public facing role? Mm-hmm. How to develop those skills? Toastmasters, you practice with your friends, on the job training, because I don't struggle much with public speaking. I struggle in other areas, but some people really do struggle. So how do you build more competency?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Folks don't know this, but I'm actually very introverted. People are always like, "What? You're not? You are? Like, I don't believe you." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm definitely introverted." But I think it's identifying what you want from your career. And one of the things I was really interested in was public speaking. So for me to develop it, it was okay. Maybe I have to record myself, do a practice run of a speech and see how that sounds, and like working on my tone and my inflection, because folks in Canada, might understand how my voice might rise. And lower, but when I'm speaking at Aspen Institute Climate Ideas Conference, there might be some folks who aren't familiar with my tone or the language that I use. So one of the most important things in public sector, when you come in, especially at the federal level, is that they try to tell you to ensure you're communicating, whether written or verbally, in a way where someone at a grade 7 or 6 reading level can understand you. And I think that speaks to ensuring that everyone has access to public knowledge and research of the work we do at the federal level. But I think it's just a great marker of a good communicator. So I definitely do the recording thing. I definitely work on my tone, and I definitely just focus on building that, I guess, that trust with other folks that I'm engaging with. I think just to think of it as we're just having a conversation. I think, Craig, you said that in one of our emails. Don't worry, it's just having a regular conversation. And sometimes that's what it is. You're here to share your great ideas and hopefully learn from others as well. But it definitely is a work in the process. And putting myself out there for public speaking was definitely a challenge, but I've been doing it for about 2 years now, and you just get better with time, I would say.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I struggle with certain types of professional settings. It's a whole thing, like the faking it or the imposter syndrome, but it is something that is a really important skill, knowing how to communicate whatever is the most authentic way to yourself. So please let us know where you're watching from. I think we have about 15 countries and lots of people commenting, but it'd be great to have questions coming in. So a question for you is, can you describe a little bit, nothing super in depth, but what is your, you're doing climate finance and advising and supporting, and thankfully Canada has a somewhat progressive government thinking about environment. I won't get too much into politics, but there has been governments. So how does Environment Canada come up with its vision? And then what is your part in terms of trying to execute or support or develop that vision with partners?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for us here in Canada, we have the Pan-Canadian Framework, which is our economy-wide climate action framework document. So experts, I think it was 2015 where the document was first implemented, and we've had more recent iterations like the Healthy Economy, Healthy HEHE document, and so many other documents to support the work we do. So we use those as our guiding documents. And of course, each department has its own mandates. So areas where they need to focus in on, or where the minister has committed to. So those are the priorities we lead with. We're like, all right, this is what Canada needs to push forward in regards to ambition. And then how that translates to the work I do then is, all right, we have a certain amount. Canada has committed to 5.3 billion in climate finance up until 2026. It's a doubling of our previous 2.65 billion. So we have a funding envelope available to us, and we've identified, Canada's priorities such as clean technology, supporting developing countries, supporting climate governance. All right, so we identified what these priorities are. Now, how do we create programming around that? Is that workshops? Is that pilot projects? Is that building the technical capacity of folks in developing countries? Is it building regional hubs so that they can better engage with each other in their region? Is it identifying, a regional leader and to support them so that, when we're done with our project, they can lead their region, or maybe a private sector entity can join in and partner and mobilize some more action in the specific sector or emission reduction area that we're working in. So, some projects we have might be in waste management, or might be in emissions reduction in methane, or might be focusing on the building sector. So it really differs by programming project that we have, but we're really doing some really good work. So I really enjoy it so far.
So welcome, Lena from Kalamazoo, Michigan. I hope it's not too cold. And welcome, Fred from Kampala, Uganda. Please, if you want to bring in your questions. So one thing is, if you think back on the portfolio of projects or partners you're engaged with, obviously I don't want to put you on the spot, but what are one or two that more inspire you, that, they're kind of either doing community level change or have potential to, there's like some really interesting innovation or partnership or investment, and that's starting to inspire others elsewhere?
Yeah, I really like that question. I can't speak to the specific organizations, but I could speak to the work that they're doing. So one of the organizations that we're working with, they're basically the leaders on methane program development and pilot implementation. And they've really been able to do some impactful work in the Latin American region and previously in the Asia Pacific region as well. And one thing that really, is one of our priorities is that we're building up local level expertise. We don't want to bring in consultants that, have the expertise and then they leave and there's no knowledge transfer going on or capacity development occurring. So for us, we want to ensure we're working with organizations that are going to implement that in the programs we develop. So that's an organization there where we know they've been reputable in being able to support local level experts and bringing them onto these larger projects so that they can gain that experience. And I remember one of the folks in a project that we had in West Africa, one of the consultants were brought on for that project. And then, a year later, that consultant was also part of a committee group that Canada was part of. So seeing how that individual was able to move from, project-based to now like a countrywide climate leadership role is really a testament to what these opportunities can provide. And in regards to technology, there are a lot of great organizations that are really leading the charge in technologies, and they have the big expansive networks. They just don't know or have the best opportunities to share those technologies and showcase what's available and what's emerging. So, we can be that middleman where like, hey, this country needs support here, and you have that technology. Do you want to help us, develop something where they can understand better this technology is available to them to reduce emissions?
So Catalina and I, we do small scale angel investing in social impact startups, and there's just like the most mind blowing things going on around the world.
Yeah.
And there's one we're not investing in, but I've talked to the founders called Zed Motors, which is in West Africa, and they are building out a wonderful electric motorcycle, but also with solar charging stations. They're super cool. But there's so much going around in the world. But a question related to that. So let's say you encounter someone, let's say professionally or personally, who's a skeptic, because there's plenty of those people who are like climate. Let's not say it's a hoax, but it's like it's because most people don't believe that. But let's say the tension between economic growth and climate, and that because Canada has a big mining sector, and Colombia is having this debate, because we have a lot of extractive industry, and so how do you frame the balance, not in your professional, but just personally? When someone is like, well, climate's important, but people need jobs and income and stability, and like putting too much emphasis on sustainability is going to hurt like the bottom economic line. So do you have any talking points or data that you might engage someone with who's like climate, yes, but like I need a job?
Yeah. I really like that question. Of course, this comment would not be speaking to the work I support in the government, but just personally, just being able to learn about which industries are going to be more affected by our transition to, lower carbon economy, and what does a low carbon economy look like? And honestly, when we look to, for example, the US economy, the amount of folks that are in the sectors that will be most affected, it's less than 1 million people, so less than 1 million jobs. So I think, working with numbers like that, it's an opportunity to support the future of work and transferring skills to more sustainable economies and sectors. So when we are working with the numbers, I think it makes things a little bit more manageable and a little bit more feasible for folks like that who might say, oh no, this is a hamper to the economy. This shouldn't be the priority. We can do both at the same time, right? We can identify, all right, these are the folks that will need that upskilling and that transfer opportunity opportunity. Let's prioritize them. Let's develop workshops and facilitation that's available to them. And I've done that personally when I worked in the incubator, the Impact Center, which is now part of the University of Toronto's entrepreneurship program. And my job was to help recently engineering graduates that want to or might be interested in energy efficiency and the lighting industry. So my job was to, hey, I know you might be interested in like, this aspect of the industry that might contribute to uh, emissions degradation and things like that. But there's an energy efficiency aspect that you might be curious about as well that you might want to explore. So, I ran a program. I think it was a 6 or 8 week program where they were then able to explore opportunities in energy efficiency. And then I think we had after 30 days or 60 days, a very high, like over 80% job attainment in the energy efficiency industry. So these are folks who are already skilled, but we're diverting their skills into more low carbon and more energy efficient jobs. And it's capable and it's available. It doesn't have to negatively impact our economy as a whole. So those are where I would find opportunities for, I guess, enlightenment and commonality.
So a related question, climate finance, how strong are your finance skills? Like, are you a numbers person and you're like a master of all things Excel or spreadsheets? Or because climate finance, I mean, obviously we're only spending about 140 billion per year on bilateral international aid. And to achieve the SDGs, obviously there's a lot of other investment, but we need 2 to 3 trillion. So how important is like the financial aspect of all this in terms of just, obviously managing budgets, but other aspects, and how are you developing or how have you developed those skills?
Yeah. So for me, how I even got interested in climate finance was the realization of, oh, we need economies to back up, our climate action. These projects won't get funded if there isn't enough buy-in and enough incentives. So for me, in terms of skill sets, when I was in my master's program, I was able to do an exchange focusing on economic policy and climate policy in China. So for me, even getting those skill sets was really important. And then in my master's as well, we had courses on public finance. So that, introductory opportunity was great for me to like understand, okay, this is how public finance works through the bureaucracy and the governance of things. But in regards to like actual finance work, you don't need like a bachelor's in economics or accounting. It's great. I think it's great if you do have that, but you don't necessarily need it for the role that we do. For us, it's finding opportunities where we could use climate finance effectively to support developing countries. So if you have that strategic frame of thinking, if you have that project management, program management frame of thinking, I think you could be really successful in the field. And I know in the private sector, they might consider it more as like impact financing or sustainable financing. There's different, different colloquialisms for it, but it's essentially the same thing, trying to find projects to support, as you mentioned, angel investment and just like, supporting especially local level finance projects. There's a lot of good work going on.
So let's say someone has already had a career 5 or 10 years or is in grad school. What is your advice? I mean, increasingly people are, when I was your age, the idea was like, you should never leave a job, not never, but like leaving jobs too frequently was a negative.
Yeah.
And now it's almost the opposite. Like not for all industries, like obviously if you're a doctor, civil servant, military, airline pilot, but now it's like if someone stays at a job for more than 5 or 6 years, it's shocking. But what is your advice? I mean, I've done nonprofit, I've done startups, I've done academia. Like, what is your advice? How does someone decide? Like, they're interested in climate, but what are the how do they decide whether it's government or an NGO or a startup? How to decide what industry to engage with the issue on?
Yeah, I've actually had someone recently reached out to me about this because they were wondering, hey, should I get a master's in, policy? Because I think I want to work in this, but I'm more so, focused on advocacy, and that's where my passion is. And my advice to them is go where your passion is. If it is advocacy, try to explore, okay, what type of graduate program? It doesn't necessarily have to be a master's, but maybe it's a certificate. Maybe it's I know for folks who work in the building sector, they get a lot of lead certs, or is it a PM cert, or equity, diversity and inclusion cert that you need. I think it's understanding where you want your impact to be. And for me, it was at this point in my life, it's really important that my impact is as wide as I can possibly make it. And, I think slowly over time, I might switch to more local level work, because I am really passionate about local level projects. So I think it's trying to understand where you want your impact to be. And that's going to change throughout your life. I feel like folks shouldn't be feel like they have to stay in one place for all of their life. But it's good to move around, and it's good to diversify. As you said, you've been able to work in so many different sectors. And some people, that's not what they're keen to, and that's fine. But for folks who are, I would definitely encourage that. But obviously in a way that makes sense to you and your expectations of work.
Thanks. So some questions have come in, first from Kejia. So what's the trend that global governments talk about climate, but then there's so much backlash? And she's talking about DeSantis. I'm actually, even though we live in Columbia, I'm a resident of Columbia, I'm also a resident of Florida. That's right.
Okay.
So for people who don't know Governor DeSantis, and I'd say about 20 states in the US have started to, particularly states that have let's say, a strong extractive industry, or are starting to say they're trying to ban any public pensions being invested in environmental social governance criteria.
Wow.
And under the idea that this is woke investing and that it's actually bad policy. And there's lots of people in the finance and policy industry saying, actually, it's bad financial policy to ban this. But there's a huge debate in the US. So any reflections, it doesn't have to be on DeSantis, but kind of governments say one thing, and often their actions don't match that, or they're actually totally against any kind of environmental finance considerations.
Yeah, that's an interesting area to really try to grapple with. I think what I would say is to understand that sometimes what governments implement as their priorities, or what has been documents governments have been working with or leading with for decades, might not be similar to who might be leading in present day. So, for example, our Pan-Canadian framework has been with us. Has been there for close to almost a decade now. But, if someone else comes into government, they might have a different framework on what they want to lead with. So there is concerns there. Of course, naturally, I would expect most people to have. But what I will say from my perspective is that there are a lot of good incentives to ensure there's alignment between what is implemented in regards to public service and what's actually being done to, example, pension investments. The government of Canada has implemented its first green fund, federal green fund of $5 billion. So, even our government is exploring how to support more market-based mechanisms to ensure that alignment between what we say at the department level and what is being said in other spheres as well. And I know, from my colleagues that work in climate investment and impact investment, they want to push for better alignment between, if it's either a green bond or more financing to support a low carbon economy. That's where the future is. That's where most countries and organizations and institutions have made commitments for. So if we want everyone to be part of the future, we really have to ensure that folks have a better understanding of the value add of that type of investing.
So thanks for a great comment. I teach a class on this, on Maven investing, and I'll just say two things. So one, to me, money is no use on a dead planet, and we're destroying the planet. So let's say you could get rich destroying the planet, which lots of corporations and people are. It's collectively, it makes zero sense. And I fundamentally believe that both, if you want to increase your wealth, but actually have a planet, it's got to be climate sensitive things. and that as individuals, you can do a lot, whatever industry you're in. If you're a bank, if you're fortunate to have a retirement plan, if you want to advocate on the governmental level, if you're a university, try to get them to divest. Like individuals, I mean, we need regulation, and the EU is far ahead of this compared to the US in terms of regulating, because so much of the investments labeled as ESG, environmental, social governance, are total greenwashing.
Yeah.
So the EU is getting much more rigorous. But as an individual, you can educate yourself. If you've got $2 extra or euros, wherever you park that money can have such an impact. And then if you're part of an institution, like look at the resources. I put a few in here, like As You Sow, Project Drawdown, but there's so many resources to help educate and advocate for changes.
Yeah. No, and I just want to quickly, I just came across this climate fund, not encouraging this at all in any shape or form, but as you mentioned, using our individual funds to spearhead a lot of this work. And that's one I just came across recently. And I was like, this is what we need to keep pushing, where individuals can take on their space in terms of climate investment. They don't have to rely on governance or other leaders.
Yeah, so it's our sphere. Again, we're not endorsing like any financial decision you have to make on your own.
Exactly.
But just one other thing I'll say about investing is I'll offer the course again in May, but also look, a lot of places that claim to do green investing actually charge high fees for bad products. So just because something says it's green, and this is true in like marketing, if you go into a supermarket and things
you got to
are
read
labeled,
the details.
if things are like in brown packaging or labeled sustainable, often they're not. So anyway, the next question come in, and we have time for one or two more, but this is from Buyo. What ideas do you have for engaging children or youth in learning about environmental issues, and how to work together to bring those ideas to life?
Ooh, I really like this question. So of course, if you have young people in your life, I think just engaging with them on just becoming familiar with the terms, because climate action is going to be here to stay. So I guess early on, familiarizing them with what does air pollution, what does that mean? And understanding what's climate change, what does that look like, if that's something that you're keen on. I definitely know that there are teaching opportunities available, like summer camps, I know, and things like that. But if you yourself want to lead that work, I think, becoming more familiar with the material. So there might be like a workshop available where you can a free workshop. I know they have so many different workshops available where you can become familiarized with the content, and then you can make it more accessible for younger people. I know here in Canada, one of our priorities is making climate science more accessible for young folks. So maybe there might be a state or provincial level or local level that they're doing that as well, which I think is really important. We need to get young people on board in regards to understanding what we're all working on in regards to climate mitigation and adaptation.
Great. So feel free to put in one other question. I have two more, and I want to be respectful of your time. So the first thing, climate, Colombia, we've had more flooding, really bad hurricanes that have hit the coast, devastated some of the islands. And, climate change is just having a dramatic impact all over the world already.
Yeah.
So what are the things you do to stay resilient and just not say like it's all pointless?
Yeah, that's hard. Of course, so many folks go through climate anxiety as well, and just working in the impact space, there definitely can be burnout. So for me, how I stay resilient, I kind of went through this as well early on in my career of like, this is a lot of information. There's a lot going on. How do I kind of filter through what I want to focus in on, or what should guide the work that I do outside of my 9 to 5. And for me, I identified it's local projects. I love supporting local projects and youth-centered research projects, and just research projects in general. So when the opportunities arise, I've taken on like an advisory role for the Black Eco Balloon, which is an organization here up in Canada supporting BIPOC folks becoming familiarized with environmental sector and climate change, or being a researcher for the Canadian Coalition on Environmental and Climate Justice. Working on those locally focused projects for me gives me that cathartic moment of like, all right, there's a lot of chaos going on at the federal level or like at the provincial level or global level. But what can I do in my home and my local community? That gives me a lot of value. It might be different for someone else. So I think just kind of exploring what that is for yourself is really important.
Okay. If you have a link for that, be interesting to share.
Yep.
And then just my last two questions and then we'll wrap up. So one is, what type of upskilling are you working on currently, if anything? And then what are you enjoying reading or watching that may have nothing to do with climate, or it may, but just it could be like you're just like, I don't want to think about climate, and you're having fun watching or reading, or it is about climate.
Ooh, I like that. So in regards to upskilling, what I'm really curious about when I have the opportunity is to read more about Scope 3 emissions and concepts like double materiality. So for me, it's like keeping up to date on what the industry is doing outside of what I do at the federal level. That's an interest area for me in regards to upskilling. I want to understand more about emission tracking reporting. We do that in our programming, but I also want to have that understanding for myself as well. What does that look like? When a non-for-profit or a charity wants to support emission tracking, and how do we move from greenwashing to actual impactful tracking? What does that look like? And then considering what I listen to and what I do outside of my 9 to 5 to support my understanding, there's a local group. It's the Climate Council. I'll share the link, but the Climate Council here in my local region, and they have a podcast. So for me, I just keep up to date on what their concerns are about the environment, and then I also am working on my French. I love to improve my language skills, so that's something I'm definitely working on. In regards to books, I am finally finishing The Alchemist. It's taken me a while just because life is busy, but it's been a great book to just revisit chapters every now and then.
And then finally, last question for people who are looking for climate careers or just resources, do you have 2 or 3 favorite places? Like when people say, where do I go to find the opportunities or just interesting news, any key recommendations?
Yeah, so definitely the PCDN newsletter. Here in Canada, we have the Green Career Center. They're up and starting and been doing some really great work for a couple of years. And then what I would also consider is so I feel like a lot of the recommendations I'll provide are Canada-centric, but there are various newsletters I've signed up to, either it's like women-led or BIPOC-focused resources available. But there are some, as I mentioned, the database that I recently came across that I will definitely share with you. And it's basically a database on, so you want to work in climate, and all those resources are available. So I'll share that. And I think it's just like keep your eye out for opportunities. I usually do like a search every now and then, just to see volunteer opportunities or charitable opportunities that I can contribute to.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your wisdom and tips. And thank you to everyone for joining us. So you can watch this. It'll be in a podcast format in probably 2 weeks. Please check out 100 other plus podcasts, rates. There was lots of links mentioned here, so you can see them in the LinkedIn chat. And I put a few, TerraDo, Climate Asia, Climate Base are all really good for climate careers. There's lots of places. So instead of searching individual organizations, often these networks will curate the best opportunities, and some of them are actually hiring for themselves. And look forward to seeing the amazing impact you will have in the next few years and many years beyond. And I hope next time we chat, there is more optimism about the state of the planet, both in Canada and the US, and the questions about why are people objecting to things that at least many people think are common sense and needed.
Mhm.
And thank you so much, and have a wonderful afternoon. And thank you everyone for joining us. I think we had about 15 countries, so wonderful. I don't think we had anyone else from Canada, maybe we did, but all over the world. So thank you, whatever time zone you're in. And our next podcast, we're working on it. We have a bunch scheduled for March, April, May, and we should have a really exciting guest in the next 10 days. We're just trying to finalize it. So, but I won't give too much information because it's not confirmed. But thank you so much, everyone, and have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And thanks again, Faith.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a good day.
Okay, so I'm hanging up.